Bill Maher skewered Whoopi Goldberg over recently saying it's worse to be a black person living in America today than it is to be a woman living in Iran. Here he was on Friday night on his show, Real Time with Bill Maher. Take a look.
We were talking about the trans issue before, and the New York Times really has come over on that to the sort of the sensible, liberal, not crazy woke position. I think this is a great first step toward getting the Democrats back to sanity. And a second good step would be, we got to do something about The View.
For those who missed it, here are Goldberg's comments from last week. Let's watch.
I think it's very different to live in the United States in 2025 than it is to live in Iran.
Not if you're black.
Not for everybody.
Every day, we are worried. Do we have to be worried about our kids? Are our kids going to get shot because they're running through somebody's neighborhood?
There was no shortage of social media reaction. Writer Adam B. Coleman took to X, writing, quote, "Watching millionaires on The View trash a nation that has given them lives of abundance is absolutely nauseating to witness, and to the average American comes across as incredibly ungrateful." Conservative commentator Eric Dougherty posted, quote, "I didn't think it was possible for a video to single-handedly lower my IQ, but here we are." And the Gateway Pundit account, probably a favorite of Niles, weighed in on Maher's suggestion, writing, quote, "Even Bill Maher has had it with Whoopi Goldberg and The View." Do we need a total shutdown of The View until we figure out what's going on?
Well, to that very point, the one thing that was startling to me about that is coming from Bill Maher, who famously, this is admittedly going back 20 years, lost his show on, wasn't it ABC? For comments, politically incorrect was the ABC show.
Oh, yeah.
And he had made comments in the wake of 9/11 that were regarded as offensive by some people. I think he had said something to the effect of, well, because he had said that the attackers, you couldn't call them cowards. That's my recollection of it.
Oh, that was him?
That it was, that there are lots of things that you can say were bad about them, but you can't call them cowards. Wasn't that him?
You're right. I forgot about that whole thing.
It's like I'm a human Google sitting over here, Robbie, just reflecting on Bill Maher's career.
That was, oh my God, what a stupid period in American
it was not great.
Commentary life. It was an obviously correct observation that he got fired for.
Exactly. And hence ended up on HBO. I'm sure we'll have very different views on this. I didn't find Whoopi Goldberg's views particularly offensive or wrong. I think that there is an attempt on the right from some of the people we mentioned to pretend that racism has ceased to exist. I don't think that is even remotely true. I can cite various statistics that I think unambiguously prove that racism is continuing to be a big sore in American society, and whether people on the right like that or not, it's still a fact.
Well, of course, racism does exist, and black people and other people have to deal with racism in their lives, but the comparison to Iran, it's different because Iran's mistreatment of women is state-based and is explicit government policy in a way that whatever mistreatment of racial minorities in this country is no longer explicitly government-based. We have gotten that out of our government systems, as we should. We have litigated that out of existence. I will not assert that there are no policies anywhere in the U.S. government that have some kind of disparate impact or something like that, but it is nothing like the requirements on women to be, to do X, Y, and Z as they are under Iranian society. Is that not a meaningful difference?
Well, I'm not. The comparison with Iran, which is what started this, that gets into a debatable area, of course, because I don't want to be defending the subjugation of women in Iran. I think that I had a fairly brief journalistic trip to Iran a long time ago now. But, I was working with a female fixer who was worried about, the moral police coming because her hijab was not correctly covering her hair and all of that. I'm not defending that.
Right, that seems so appallingly authoritarian to me, or obviously authoritarian in a way that is not characteristic of our system.
Right, but it's worth mentioning perhaps that on the particular episode of Real Time with Bill Maher that we were just playing, Wesley Hunt was the black Republican congressman who was on there, making the argument essentially that, we're all Americans now, we have got past this, defending, which I think is a kind of offensive thing to defending the renaming of a military barracks or installation after Robert E. Lee, Confederate general.
Well, they named it that, and they unnamed it, then they're renaming it. I just like, let's pick a name and stick with it, and not have.
Well, and maybe not. Let's not name things commemorating traitors who fought to uphold slavery.
I'm fine with that, but with do you remember the Robert E. Lee statue thing? I'm fine not having things named after Confederates. Obviously, I agree. But when they have to there was a Robert E. Lee statue specifically that they had to melt down, and it was almost like they thought the statue itself
was evil.
Was just weird. You can have a statue of a guy we can observe and comment on history. When you're naming something, it's celebratory. So I'm with you on that. But there's all the statues have to go. I think there can be a right place in museums or at battle sites where you can have statues, or you can have, and that'd be totally fine. And it's crazy to go further than that. And also that there's no limiting principle, because some of the activists who are fired up about the Robert E. Lee statues absolutely want the Thomas Jefferson statues and the George Washington statues to go to, and then I don't know. Then what's the limiting principle? Then we just got to rename everything to Panda Bear Avenue to offend no one.
Well, but I mean, I think we could agree that Robert E. Lee would be well.
That's fine if it stops there. It just never does.
Well, I mean, look, the point about it, the central point of the discussion, which was occurring there, was about the existence of racism against Black Americans, which plainly does exist.
Well, and actually,
life expectancies 5 years shorter than white people. Number of Black children going hungry is 3 times as high as white children. On and on.
Although the actual what she cited, I'm not quite sure what she was referencing. She was referencing violence against gun violence against Black people, which sure is a problem we could take more seriously. I mean, it's not. It is in almost in a large number of cases having to do with poverty and Black people disproportionately living in unsafer areas, not because the Ku Klux Klan is marching through the country gunning people down.
Well, 82% of people on death row are on death row because of offences committed against white people. That is incongruous with the thing that you have just described, which is so-called black-on-black violence. That figure shouldn't be as high as that if there was not at some level embedded into the criminal justice system a conscious or subconscious belief that white lives are somehow more important.
Well.
My friends, we have done it.
In a stunning upset, Zohran Mamdani defeated former Governor Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary for New York City mayor on Tuesday. Mamdani invoked Nelson Mandela in his victory speech. Here's some more of that.
Tonight, we made history. In the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done. An hour ago, I spoke with Andrew Cuomo about the need to bring this city together, as he called me to concede the race.
Speaking from his campaign headquarters, Cuomo congratulated his opponent and applauded him. Take a look at that.
Tonight was not our night. Tonight was Assemblyman Mamdani's night, and he put together a great campaign, and he touched young people and inspired them and moved them and got them to come out and vote.
Virtually unknown at the outset of the race, 33-year-old Mamdani surged in recent weeks, running an ultra-progressive campaign centred on managing the cost of living. He surpassed Cuomo, who had at one point been leading by double digits in the polls. Ultimately, even Cuomo had to acknowledge that the sizable lead the Democratic Socialists built on Election Day couldn't be overtaken in later rounds of New York's ranked choice system.
Mamdani will go on to run in the mayoral general election in November. Sitting New York City Mayor Eric Adams was not in the Democratic primary. He will run as an independent in November. Cuomo signaled he has some decisions to make, but still has the option of running in the general. So this is possibly not the last word. Well, it's literally not the last word, because there will be a general election. Whether Cuomo enters it is an open question at this point. Cuomo has said he's going to think about it. So we shall see. Even if he does enter, I think Mamdani would probably be the favorite at this point, although it does get a little bit complicated if there's both Eric Adams and Cuomo and this Curtis Sliwa fellow. So we'll see. But for now, big win for Mamdani. I think it's not actually particularly surprising. We described it as a shock, as an upset. But Mamdani is a charismatic figure who campaigned very hard and is likable. I do not want his policies for New York City, but oh well. Versus Cuomo, who resigned in disgrace as governor within living memory. This was like 50 years ago or something, as a result of both sexual misconduct and a really, really, really awful scandal where he tried to cover up, disguise how many people had died as a result of his COVID nursing homes policy. He also didn't campaign very energetically, for what it's worth, according to all reports. So this really shouldn't be a surprise. And, I think a lot of people are going to be saying, even people who, like myself, do not want many of Mamdani's policies, they're going to be saying, well, this is what the Democratic establishment gets for backing this really, really bad horse.
Yeah. So I think that, for all our ideological differences, we share a distaste for Andrew Cuomo,
Yeah.
I think. And I think that kind of is reflected more broadly in these results where Mamdani has beaten him actually fairly comfortably, coming from nowhere and was, had much less money behind him and all that. Before we get into the politics that Mamdani espouses, I do have to say that it is on a non-partisan or non-ideological basis, it is one of the joys in politics when a front-runner with money behind him and who's, frankly, in my opinion, fairly politically cynical and is the kind of machine politician gets beaten by the upstart. And so I think a lot of people, whether they agree with everything Mamdani advocates or not, were shedding no tears for Andrew Cuomo. Let's put it that way. Now, in relation to Mamdani, what I found interesting about the campaign was the scare tactics, as I would view them, against a left-wing candidate didn't actually work. They didn't work in terms of his social and economic policies, free buses, government-run grocery store, I know an idea that you're a big fan of, in every borough, but they also didn't work on the Palestine question, where I think he was smeared as anti-Semitic or toxic in some way, when in fact he was putting forth a broadly pro-Palestinian position, which I think a lot of people, certainly in the Democratic base, certainly among younger voters in the Democratic base, share.
I thought his comments on, so some of the knocks on him I thought were unfair on that question. I thought his comments on the phrase globalize the intifada were not good. I also think he's running to be mayor of New York City, not like to coordinate the foreign policy of the United States. So that really wouldn't be a reason not to vote for him from my point of view.
Right, although Cuomo tried to make it a reason not
very
to vote
much
for
so.
him. Yeah.
I've tried to make it about foreign policy instead of the lived experiences of people in New York and the needs that they have. The demographics are very interesting, by the way. Mamdani did better with white people and Hispanic. Cuomo did massively better with black people. He also did better with, this is according to New York Times data, with lower income people. So the free grocery store idea is maybe preferred by the affluent. Mamdani won middle income and higher income people by 10 and 13 points. Cuomo won lower income people by 13 points. Very interesting.
No, it is. I mean, all those factors are interesting, but I see you have the map, which of course we can't show on screen there, but Mamdani carried, an enormous number of areas throughout the city there. Even Staten Island, I think, which is typically the most centrist borough by far. I think Mamdani did prevail, not in Staten Island overall, but in some precincts within it. And so I think he did have a much broader appeal than people thought. Now, you can argue about the extent to which that's an anti-Cuomo vote or a pro-Mamdani vote, but the result itself speaks for itself.
It does. I wonder how this will make people feel about ranked choice voting. I think Democratic establishment types or moderate liberal people are going to hate ranked choice voting even more as this results from their perception that this allowed, Mamdani to kind of sneak through. I'm not sure that's actually true statistically based on what happened, but it maybe validates those of us on both the right and the left who wish it wasn't always just a binary choice between some awful candidate and then someone who is ideologically unacceptable, so you have to vote for the awful candidate. I am open-minded, but I seem to like ranked choice voting, I think.
No, I mean, some people on the left like ranked choice voting because it blunts the argument that you're wasting your vote by voting for someone more fringy. If you do so and that person gets eliminated in an early round, your second preference and third preference and so on can actually make a difference.
I'm going to be looking to see if Cuomo and Eric Adams have some kind of discussion or cut some kind of deal
Cuomo Adams pact.
That's going to be interesting.
President Trump wants to give his personal attack dog at DOJ a lifetime judicial appointment. His name is Emil Bove, Trump's former criminal defense attorney.
Bove asked us to base a prosecutorial decision not on the facts, not on the law, but on a political calculation.
Bove cannot be trusted to be impartial on the Court of Appeals.
Emil Bove III, you may recognize him from being at Trump's side during the now infamous Stormy Daniels hush money trial. Well, now he's Trump's nominee for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals and apparent judicial bogeyman.
That video we just played from the Justice Connection is just one of many voices from both sides of the aisle warning senators to vote against Bove's confirmation. The reason? Alleged legal and ethical misconduct. Those two former DOJ lawyers we saw earlier allege Bove was behind the quid pro quo deal between New York City Mayor Eric Adams and the Trump administration to drop the corruption investigation into Adams. They also allege that he, Bove, was the one who ordered the list of January the 6th investigators be made and was the one who later fired several J6 prosecutors.
And then there's the bombshell report from the New York Times this week that outlines how Bove was allegedly willing to ignore court orders to further President Trump's mass deportation campaign. The report relies on a DOJ whistleblower by the name of Erez Ruveni, who says he was fired after questioning the Salvadorian deportation flights earlier this year. Ruveni says as that legal battle was playing out, Bove insisted that, quote, the planes needed to take off no matter what, and said the DOJ would need to consider telling the courts F you and ignoring any order that would halt the deportations before they could take place.
In response to Bove's nomination, Democrats are raising the alarm. Senator Cory Booker posted to X, Emil Bove has no respect for the rule of law and court orders. He does not belong on the federal bench. And his colleague from California, Senator Adam Schiff, says the nomination to the federal judiciary is just the first step.
Why is Donald Trump looking to him now in the Court of Appeals? He wants someone who will unquestionably and without concern for the morality or immorality, the ethics or lack of ethics, the lawfulness or the lawlessness, will do and order and opine the way Donald Trump wants. He wants just a complete and utter sycophant like Emil Bove on the Supreme Court.
Meanwhile, some conservatives do oppose this nomination, including Greg Nunziata, the executive director for the Society for the Rule of Law, calling Bove unacceptable and sending a letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee urging them to reject him. Nunziata writes that Bove's record is, quote, deeply incompatible with a lifetime appointment to the circuit judgeship, but Mike Davis with the Article 3 Project insists his resume makes him qualified. Take a listen to what he had to say on Steve Bannon's War Room podcast.
The FedSoc types like Ed Whalen wailing about Emil Bove, saying somehow that Emil Bove is not good enough. He graduated at the top of his class at Georgetown Law School. He was a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, the premier federal district in the country. He was a national security prosecutor. He was the acting deputy attorney general, the acting number 2 at the Justice Department, and he was President Trump's lawyer.
So look, I think that it's easy to get lost in the sort of weeds here where people are talking about Emil Bove's academic qualifications or Mike Davis disparaging FedSoc.
We were talking about academic qualifications in just the other segment, Niall.
Yes, well, I mean, we can talk about his qualifications if you like. I don't think he's unqualified in terms of his academic record, but that's not really the argument. The argument, particularly in the New York Times piece, does go to the idea of him conspiring in lawlessness, allegedly. And it comes from this whistleblower, Erez Ruveni, who had worked in the Justice Department for a long time and notes that he, Ruveni, had previously defended some of the more controversial elements of Trump's migration policies. And I think the key point here, Robbie, it seems to me, is this meeting that Ruveni outlines, where Trump is about to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. That's very controversial. The idea is that as soon as he does so, there are going to be these flights to El Salvador carrying illegal migrants. Mm-hmm. Now, what then happens, according to Ruveni, is he raises the issue, Ruveni does, well, what happens if a judge steps in? And Bove, in very profane terms, says, well, it basically doesn't matter, we'll ignore them.
According to this person.
According to this person. Now, this person says that there are many other people in the room. We shall see what they have to say about it. But if that is true, if that is borne out, then obviously that is not the conduct of someone who is fit to be a circuit court judge.
Yeah, I'm looking for because I have not followed this particularly closely, what Republicans say in response, and it's mostly, I mean, I don't actually think there's much Republican nomination to him. We read the quotes by this Greg Nunziata figure who's, I see, running for the Bulwark, so, you know, make of that
Trump
what you,
critical,
what
Trump
you
skeptical.
will. What I am seeing is conservative MAGA world people putting pressure, tweeting any Republican who doesn't vote for this to confirm this guy is going to face our wrath. Kind of a Pete Hegseth situation again when Iowa Senator Joni Ernst was uncertain and somebody else was uncertain too, facing the pressure to do it. So that's really what's happening here. I mean, I think that they should do what judges say, obviously. You shouldn't. It's not a good policy to tell the administration to ignore what judges say, because that sets you up for obvious confrontation that you don't want in terms of just being the wrong thing to do. So if he did do that, that was wrong, but I have no doubt Republicans will fall in line to support him.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think it's purely about the politics or what the party line vote is.
Certainly not that he used the F word.
No, I mean, no, right. But I mean, the point is that we see and hear people like Stephen Miller, as well as Trump, but particularly Stephen Miller, constantly talking about judicial coups and language like this, plainly setting the groundwork to ignore court orders. That is illegal, and it is setting up a situation where the president and his allies are going to claim the right to act illegally. Now, if Emil Bove is part of that effort in relation to the Alien Enemies Act or anything else, that's obviously a major problem. And I think there is a really substantive issue here. Now, of course, Bove has the right to offer contrary evidence or say why he didn't claim that he didn't say the things of which he has been accused. But if he did do so, then that's someone who shouldn't be in any high office at all, in my opinion.
I didn't like the way things were going. I thought people were hurting. They didn't like the way things were going. And Kamo was literally just going, yeah, we're going to keep doing that. You can't be surprised if you go, yeah, I thought Joe did a great job and we're going to keep on doing that, if people are upset and they decide to vote in a different direction.
Yeah. Comedian and podcaster Andrew Schulz providing some insight into why he says he cast his vote for Donald Trump last November despite aligning with more liberal candidates in the past, like Bernie Sanders. He says the shift toward Trump last November can be explained less by voters moving to the right and more by a shifting of the two major political parties. Take a listen.
We have no problem saying that Trump completely changed the Republican Party. Like, it looks nothing like the party of 10 years ago. Right. Like, he completely transformed it. You could make the argument that, like, Bernie is transforming the Democratic Party. So we know that parties change. And I think people kind of stay in their areas and parties shift. And sometimes they can shift and grab more people. So that was the conversation I was trying to say. It's not people running away. It's parties running away.
His comments come as Democrats are scrambling to find a podcasting star, the so-called Joe Rogan of the left. And they have launched Speaking with American Men, or SAM, an effort to reach out to young men.
Yeah, Andrew Schulz is certainly speaking for how a lot of people feel that the parties have changed, or the Democratic Party left them behind, or the Republican Party is trying to capture their vote. It is often, you know, in very abstract terms that's addressed, because I don't know how many policies of the Republican Party have actually changed. There is certainly less consensus around international trade. There is more of a consensus on maximally being for immigration restriction. So I think Trump has impacted the Republican Party, certainly in many ways. I would have said up until a week ago that he had also shifted the Republican Party into a more non-interventionist direction, although the Iran exception is now so glaring that you might not be able to make such an argument that the Republican Party at this moment, concentrated on this issue, actually very closely resembles the Republican Party of yesteryear. But maybe that's just recency bias or something.
No, I mean, I think that's a completely valid point. The thing that perplexed me about those Andrew Schulz remarks was it's just not clear to me what he wants. Like, what is his prescription for the right policies he wants enacted? It seems very vibe shifty to me. And also, it does frustrate me slightly in the sense that I think the logic is lazy in suggesting what he suggested in the first clip that we played, where someone says, I don't like what incumbent X is doing, therefore I'll vote for challenger Y, with seemingly not really very much thought about whether the alternative is going to be better, simply out of disdain for the existing option.
Well, I can understand in some cases registering a protest vote for the, for instance, in the New York City mayor race. I have no doubt if I probably considered all of their policies alongside Cuomo versus Mamdani, I am sure I would prefer Cuomo's policies. I would not and could not vote for Cuomo given what he did. And if you, I mean, because of the ranked choice voting system, I could just vote for neither of them. I would. Right. I would research the other 80 people running, and I would vote for one of them. But if you put a gun to my head and made me vote, or they had a different system where I had to vote for Cuomo or Mamdani, I would probably vote for Mamdani just as I cannot vote for Cuomo based on what he did, even though if you looked, I agree with his policies even less. Right. You know what I mean?
You know, I do. I mean, I do take the point that there are certain people who you just can't.
I think some people would have done that with Joe Biden, saying if he's still, this is what you gave us, you deserve to lose, I'm going to vote for Trump. Now, then they did switch him with Kamala Harris, maybe that muted some of that effect,
well, you see, in Schulz's case, it seems to me that he's not exactly making that argument. He's saying Kamala Harris was going to continue what Joe Biden did. Therefore, I want something unspecified but different, therefore I'm going to vote for Trump. And he cited that this sense that people are hurting, which is true. I mean, there's no question about that. And you look at things like wage stagnation, inflation, and all of that. But then surely the question has to arise, well, does Donald Trump have policies that repair that? And it's not even clear to me that Schulz actively or specifically concluded that the answer to that was yes. It was simply, well, I don't want what has come before, so I'll vote for the other guy. And I think in this case, the other guy is so well-known, sloganeering, mendacious, etc., that there are all sorts of questions around that.
Well, this is why...
What's the eye roll about,
we libertarians... no, I was not going to argue against you on what you were saying about Trump, but we libertarians, are lukewarm on the whole democracy kind of thing because voters are irrational. And I mean, voters clearly. I'm not recommending any other system.
Lukewarm on the whole democracy kind of thing.
Don't you feel a little lukewarm about it? Voters they hate the system and they hate the establishment and they want to throw the bums out and they want to radically change the system. But then they don't actually want any kind of radical change. They don't want more spent. They're not willing to spend more. They don't want their taxes raised. They just have a nostalgia for the past. They think everything was better when they were little. I myself have increasingly succumbed to this thinking as I get up there in age and I long for the 90s were so great. That is like voters have a fondness for the past and don't like change, but they also hate the systems and they hate the party and they want throw them out, anti-establishment. It's fundamentally irrational. There's no way to fit that need. So then you get spokespeople like Andrew Schulz saying basically that, let's do something in the vaguest terms, because if you get more specific, well, then nobody actually does want those changes.
Right.
So...
Which is
voters, man, democracy.
Well, look, I'm not going to join you in your skepticism or ambivalence about democracy.
Ambivalence is a good word.
I think
I'm ambivalent.
It is the what's that phrase of Winston Churchill?
The least bad system. Well, that's fine. That's a fine way of characterizing it.
Ever been tried.
Yeah, that's a good
I'm not
way
denying that voters can be irrational. Sometimes in opinion polls, you see completely contradictory findings.
Yes.
But that does not mean that we should cast out democracy.
Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act poll very differently. They are the same thing. They are the same thing.
Yeah. And a great social progress made by the Democratic Party, of course, Robbie, one that has expanded access to health insurance for a great number of people, alleviating human suffering, as government
Except
should
the
do.
people who got kicked off plans that they were perfectly happy with, despite what Obama said about keeping it. One more Thomas Massey-related point today.
Your hero.
He one time gave an interview, and he so nailed this dynamic. He said that, in the Tea Party era, where it looked like that was the last time the Republican Party was taking on a slightly more libertarian mindset or views closer to my own, and we really thought like libertarianism was having a moment, and that was the future of the Republican Party. And he gave some interview where he said he thought that at the time too, and then what he later realized is voters just wanted, on the right, the craziest thing, and for a while that was libertarianism. Right. And then when Trump came along, that was the thing they wanted.
It was by Trump.
Right. We just couldn't compete. It was you're going to lose market share to the more out there thing, and that's kind of what I hear echoes of that in the even the for obviously Bernie Sanders has a lot of very specific policies and does want very radical transformative change, but as a figure who is just against the establishment, that was part of his appeal to people who have all sorts of actual range of policy ideas. For a lot of people, it was about his ideas. For others, it's just that he was, again, railing against the establishment, which everybody likes.
No, absolutely. Everyone does like that. And my worry about it on a broader sense than politics is that it sometimes makes people, in my opinion, too susceptible to conspiracy theories. But in terms of the political angle, there's no question at all that there's a very strong anti-establishment, anti-status quo impulse out there. And people like Sanders, you see that in the terms of the crowds that he's drawing on the tour that he is on, sometimes joined by AOC. I mean, she is trying, I think, to capture those people who want radical change while softening her own positions slightly. Trump is still, in my opinion, Trump is seen as a change agent by some. I think it is a very malevolent change for the most part.
A regime change agent.
As perhaps. Getting back to where we started, Robert. Getting back to where we started.
While the Trump administration wages war against the Iranian nuclear program, Democrats are once again calling for impeachment because the last two were so successful.
Many on the left are echoing Republican Congressman Thomas Massey's stance that this was a de facto declaration of war and is therefore unconstitutional because Congress was not involved. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez took to X on Saturday, writing, "The president's disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers. He has impulsively risked launching a war that may ensnare us for generations. It is absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment." But the idea of impeachment doesn't seem to have much traction with some of AOC's Democratic colleagues. Take a listen to Adam Schiff on CNN.
We've seen what a high bar there is to impeachment when one party in Congress, the Republican Party, is willing to work completely in lockstep with the president. I think the better remedy, frankly, is if Republicans will show any backbone whatsoever, is to pass a war powers resolution to prevent any further military action that is not purely defensive, that is designed to protect service members' lives, American lives, and our interests. That, to me, ought to be the most immediate step.
Criticism is coming in from Republicans as well. In response to the call for impeachment, Marjorie Taylor Greene shot back at AOC, saying, "Shut up, you pathetic little hypocrite. You fully supported our military and IC running the proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. You voted to fund the Ukraine war under your president with dementia. You don't get to play anti-war and moral outrage anymore."
Meantime, Intel officials are crying foul about Trump bypassing Congress in a different way. The top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Representative Jim Himes, directing this post to Trump on X. Quote, "According to the Constitution we are both sworn to defend, my attention to this matter comes before bombs fall, full stop." Himes is a member of the so-called Gang of Eight, that's high-level members of Congress, who are supposed to be briefed on classified intelligence matters. Democrats say Republican members were indeed briefed, while they, the Democrats, were left in the dark.
I think the proper hypocrisy charge is not really against AOC, but against, I think you could maybe make that charge against, for instance, Nancy Pelosi. I saw old tweets of hers, celebrating the Libya intervention, which also should have been voted on by Congress, and then now condemning this. Again, here I am, with Thomas Massie and with AOC and with other people, with Ro Khanna. I think this, at the very least, needs to be voted on. This is an offensive war against a sovereign nation that did not attack us first. You're right that Trump can respond to attacks on us without necessarily going through Congress, although he should eventually talk to Congress about it. And we can also aggressively pursue war against terrorists across the Middle East as part of the previous authorization to fight the global war on terror. Iran is a different animal. We need a separate declaration if we're going to do this, and that will be good that'd be healthy for our democracy, because then people who vote for and against it can be held accountable by the voters later on. So I see why Congress doesn't want to do that, with a few principled iconoclasts notwithstanding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, Iran is a sovereign nation which the United States has just bombed. There was no national emergency in the sense of an attack, which is the kind of thing that a president can use as permission to not have congressional approval. If you look at the War Powers Act, there isn't really any serious doubt that this is in breach of it, or that congressional approval should have been sought for this. Now, in terms of the politics of it, I'm not entirely sure that argument resonates with the public at large. I mean, I think sometimes that may be seen as a little bit of a arcane issue. I don't see it that way, but I'm not sure that it's a big thing for the general public.
Where do you think the Democrats are going to end up on this? Because Republicans are, it is Trump's party. It's mostly united behind Trump.
Right.
I think some in the MAGA base are not totally pleased with this, but they're not going to rebel against Trump over it. Unless it goes on and gets really bad, as it did with Iraq. Everybody eventually did turn on George W. Bush. So it's going to be a Republican Party that I think is mostly in support of this, with not everybody, and there will continue to be arguments between Tucker Carlson type people and so on. Does that mean the Democrats are going to be the party that is against this? I mean, some of its leadership is not against it. Chuck Schumer is not against it.
No, and I think that is why there is this concentration on the impeachment idea from some people, which I think you can make an abstract argument for, but like I say, I'm skeptical of its political benefits. But the problem, again, gets back to the thing that we have previously seen during the assault on Gaza, where you have, among elected officials in the Democratic Party, a lot who are very strongly supportive of Israel and some who are not, and that split runs deep in the Democratic Party. I think it runs deeper among Democrats than it does among Republicans, who are broadly very supportive of Israel, and just the split there is about interventionism. So I think that Democrats generally will be watching this to see, does it go really bad? Is the US lured into a bigger conflict? If that is the case, then I think politically, that gives the Democrats more room for maneuver. Right now, they're stuck between the pro-Israel and more Israel-skeptical faction, it seems to me.
And public polling is right now all over the place. I saw some polling, I think, from the Washington Post this morning that suggested people are pretty in support of the strikes. Now, again, after the immediate aftermath of doing the strikes, everyone feels, mission accomplished, very happy about it. So that could change very rapidly. But, there's support. Also in the abstract, yes, there's support for them not having a nuclear weapon. If you were just asked me, do you want them to have a nuclear weapon or not? Well, of course not, but it's what are we willing to do to stop that is really relevant here.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we don't love North Korea having a nuclear weapon either, but we don't bomb them to stop it.